The rain had just begun to fall when Owen Mercer noticed something no one else had. On the lonely stretch of countryside highway, where most drivers were too focused on getting home before the storm, a police cruiser sat crooked in a muddy ditch with its emergency lights barely flickering. At first, Owen thought another officer must already be there. But as he slowed his aging pickup truck, he realized the road was completely empty. Then he saw a motionless female police officer lying beside the driver's door, her uniform soaked with rain, her breathing painfully shallow. What happened over the next 24 hours would change countless lives forever and leave an entire police department speechless. Before we continue, if you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in humanity, and subscribe to Journey of Kindness. Your support helps us bring more true-to-heart stories like this one. Owen Mercer never imagined his ordinary Tuesday would become the most important day of his life. At 38 years old, he had learned that life rarely gave second chances. 4 years earlier he had buried his wife after a long illness, leaving him to raise his 9-year-old daughter, Hazel, alone. Every morning began before sunrise as he prepared breakfast, packed school lunches, and rushed to his construction job. Every evening ended with homework, dinner, laundry, and trying to convince himself that he was doing enough as both a father and a mother. It wasn't perfect, but it was filled with love. That afternoon Owen had left work early after receiving a call from Hazel's school saying she had forgotten her asthma inhaler. After dropping it off, he decided to take the longer country road home to avoid city traffic. It was a decision that seemed insignificant until he spotted the damaged patrol car resting against the embankment. Without hesitation, Owen pulled over. His heart pounded as he sprinted through the wet grass. The officer looked young, perhaps in her early 30s. Her name badge read Marisol Vega. Blood stained one shoulder of her uniform, and deep bruises covered her face. Her radio had been smashed, and her service weapon remained untouched in its holster. Years earlier, Owen had completed emergency first aid training while working construction. Those lessons came rushing back. He checked her pulse. It was weak but still there. He carefully supported her neck, covered her with his jacket, and immediately called emergency services. The dispatcher instructed him to stay with her until help arrived. Minutes felt like hours. Rain continued to fall while Owen knelt beside the injured officer, speaking softly even though she never opened her eyes. He kept telling her she wasn't alone and that help was coming. Somehow, hearing those words seemed to steady her breathing. When ambulances and additional police units finally arrived, paramedics rushed to Officer Vega while detectives quickly questioned Owen. Everything about the crash looked strange. Tire marks suggested another vehicle had forced the cruiser off the road. Yet there were no witnesses. As Officer Vega was loaded into the ambulance, one paramedic quietly admitted that if Owen had arrived even 10 minutes later, she likely would not have survived. Owen thought his role in the story was finished. He was wrong. The next morning detectives arrived at his modest home. Hazel watched nervously from the kitchen while officers explained they needed Owen's statement again. During the interview, one detective asked whether Owen had noticed a dark pickup truck speeding away from the area. At first he couldn't remember. Then something clicked. While driving toward the accident scene, he had briefly seen an old black pickup parked behind a line of trees. At the time he assumed someone was fixing a flat tire. Now that memory suddenly seemed important. Police investigators immediately searched the area Owen described. Hidden beneath thick branches they discovered something astonishing. The abandoned pickup contained stolen firearms, counterfeit identification documents, police radios, and detailed maps showing planned robberies across 3 neighboring counties. The crash hadn't been an accident at all. Officer Vega had interrupted members of an organized criminal group transporting illegal weapons. News spread quickly throughout the department. The quiet construction worker who simply stopped to help had unknowingly provided the missing clue investigators desperately needed. Meanwhile, Officer Vega remained unconscious in intensive care. Doctors weren't sure if she would recover. For Owen, life returned to its familiar routine. Bills still needed paying. Hazel still needed help with school projects. He never expected recognition. In fact, he felt slightly embarrassed whenever neighbors called him a hero. A week later, something unexpected happened. Hazel wrote a school essay titled, "The Bravest Person I Know." Instead of describing a famous athlete or movie star, she wrote about her father kneeling beside a stranger in the rain because helping someone mattered more than being late for dinner. Her teacher submitted the essay to a local newspaper. Within days the story spread across social media. People were moved not because Owen had rescued a police officer, but because he had acted without expecting anything in return. Donations began arriving anonymously for Hazel's education. Local businesses offered Owen better job opportunities. Yet he politely declined interviews, insisting Officer Vega deserved all the attention because she had risked her life protecting others every day. 3 weeks after the accident, Owen received an unexpected phone call from the hospital. Officer Marisol Vega had finally regained consciousness. One of the first names she whispered was his. When Owen entered her hospital room carrying a bouquet of wildflowers Hazel had picked herself, Marisol looked weaker than before but smiled with grateful eyes. She had no memory of the crash itself. She only remembered hearing a calm voice promising she wouldn't die alone. That voice had stayed with her throughout the darkness. Doctors later admitted that emotional reassurance often helped trauma patients continue fighting when their bodies wanted to give up. Months passed. Marisol slowly recovered through painful rehabilitation. Walking again required determination that few people ever witnessed. Owen and Hazel occasionally visited, bringing homemade cookies and encouraging cards. An unlikely friendship slowly developed. Hazel especially admired Marisol. She listened with fascination to stories about community policing, helping lost children, and comforting elderly residents during emergencies. For the first time since losing her mother, Hazel found another adult who inspired her. One autumn afternoon, Marisol visited Owen's home after completing physical therapy. She noticed photographs covering the living room walls. Every picture told the story of a father doing everything possible to keep his daughter smiling despite life's hardships. Marisol quietly realized something. The man everyone praised for saving her life had been fighting his own silent battles every single day. His heroism hadn't begun beside that crashed patrol car. It had begun years earlier when he chose hope instead of bitterness after unimaginable loss. As investigators continued building their criminal case, several suspects were finally arrested. During questioning, one confessed they had believed Officer Vega would never survive the crash. They had no idea an ordinary father driving home from work would become the reason their entire operation collapsed. The police chief later called it the most unexpected breakthrough in the department's recent history. Several months later, the city organized a public ceremony honoring Officer Vega's courage and Owen's actions. Hundreds of officers filled the auditorium. Families, teachers, construction workers, nurses, firefighters, and neighbors gathered together. When Owen's name was announced, the standing ovation lasted nearly 2 full minutes. Embarrassed, he simply looked toward Hazel. She was crying. Not from sadness. From pride. Then something happened no one expected. Officer Marisol Vega stepped away from the podium before beginning her prepared speech. Instead of thanking city officials or describing the investigation, she walked directly toward Owen and Hazel. With tears filling her eyes, she removed the silver challenge coin she had carried throughout her police career. It had been given to her by her late father on the day she graduated from the police academy. She placed it gently into Hazel's hand. Marisol explained that courage wasn't measured by uniforms or badges. Sometimes courage looked like a tired father choosing compassion over convenience. Sometimes heroes drove old pickup trucks instead of patrol cars. Many officers openly wiped away tears. Even seasoned detectives admitted they had never witnessed a ceremony quite like it. The story soon reached national news outlets. Letters poured in from people inspired to learn first aid, volunteer in their communities, donate blood, or simply check on strangers who might need help. One man's decision to stop beside a lonely highway had created a ripple effect touching thousands of lives. A year later, Officer Vega returned to full active duty. She visited Hazel's school in uniform, speaking about kindness, courage, and ordinary people making extraordinary differences. At the end of every presentation, she shared the same message. She reminded students that the person who saved her wasn't the strongest, richest, or most famous individual she'd ever met. He was simply someone who refused to drive past another human being in need. Hazel eventually framed the newspaper featuring her father's photograph. It hung beside an older family picture of her mother. Whenever visitors asked why those two pictures shared the same wall, Hazel always smiled. Because both reminded her what love looked like. One had taught her how to live. The other had shown her how to keep going. Years later, the police department established a community award recognizing citizens who displayed exceptional compassion during emergencies. The very first recipient's name became permanently engraved on the plaque. Owen Mercer. Not because he had chased criminals. Not because he had worn a badge. but because he proved that true courage begins with one simple decision: to stop, to care, and to help. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Journey of Kindness. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Blue Heart special request. Before this story ends, please comment below with the words, "Kindness always finds its way." We'd love to know where you're watching from and spread your message of hope with others. As the sun set over the same quiet highway where everything had begun, traffic flowed peacefully once again. Most drivers never knew what had happened there. They never knew a single father had changed the course of countless lives with one selfless choice. But every officer in that department remembered. Every family touched by the arrests remembered. And one little girl grew up knowing the greatest heroes are not always the ones wearing uniforms. Sometimes, they are simply ordinary people who choose kindness when no one is watching. That is the kind of courage the world never forgets.